Long before the glow of electric light or the hum of modern civilization, the people of ancient Egypt lived beneath a sky blazing with stars and mystery. Their world was carved from sand, stone, and belief, a place where gods walked beside men, and where even the act of creation itself began not with war or thunder, but with pleasure. To modern eyes, their sexual customs seemed scandalous, even shocking. Yet to the Egyptians, these rituals were sacred, woven into the very order of the universe. What we call bizarre, they called divine. It all began with one God, alone in the endless darkness before time. His name was Adam, in the Egyptian creation myth. Adam did not need a partner to bring the world into being. According to texts carved deep within pyramid walls, he created himself from the waters of chaos. Then, through an act of divine self-pleasure, he released the essence of life. From his seed sprang the first pair of deities, Shu and Tefnut, who gave birth to all other gods and eventually humankind. For the Egyptians, this was not blasphemy. It was sacred truth. To them, the universe was literally born from an act of love and desire. If you were to walk to the Temple of Karnak thousands of years ago, you might see carvings depicting Adam's hand resting upon his phallus, a gesture of power, not shame. These images weren't hidden away in secret chambers. They were carved in sacred stone meant to be seen. For the Egyptians, creation itself was erotic, not vulgar, but life-giving. Sexual energy was a divine spark that animated the world. But it did not end with myth. Every year, as the Nile began to rise and flood the fields, the Egyptians believed the cycle of creation had to be renewed. The king himself, considered a living god, performed a ritual that would make even modern audiences blush. At the river's edge, under the watchful eyes of priests and scribes, the pharaoh would reenact Adam's creation. He would spill his divine seed into the Nile, offering life back to the river that sustained his people. This was no private indulgence. It was a state ceremony, believed to ensure that the Nile's waters would rise to just the right level, enough to nourish crops, but not so much as to destroy homes. Imagine the weight of that moment. An entire civilization depending on one man's symbolic act of fertility. The crowd waited in reverent silence. The priests chanted hymns older than memory. The pharaoh's body was not his own. It was a vessel for the power of the gods. When the ritual was complete and the Nile began its annual flood, the people believed the kingdom had been blessed once again. The connection between sex, creation, and survival was absolute. Even death did not end the sacred view of pleasure. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was not a place of clouds or endless rest. It was a continuation of earthly joy, perfected and eternal. Their paradise, known as the Field of Reeds, was a mirror of Egypt itself. Fields of grain, flowing rivers, laughter, music, and yes, love. The deceased were believed to regain full bodily function, including sexuality, as part of their rebirth. In the tomb art of nobles and pharaohs, couples are often shown embracing, not as ghosts, but as living souls young again reunited. This belief stemmed from one of Egypt's most powerful and moving myths, the story of Osiris and Isis. Osiris, the god of the dead, was murdered by his jealous brother Set, who tore his body into pieces and scattered them across the land. His wife, Isis, traveled through deserts and villages, gathering the fragments of her husband's body. She found all but one, his phallus, which had been lost to the Nile. But Isis would not give up. She crafted a new one, a magical golden phallus, and through her love, conceived their son, Horus. In that act, Osiris was resurrected, becoming the first to rise from the dead. This myth defined the Egyptian understanding of resurrection. It was not enough for the soul to live on. The body had to be whole, capable of love, of pleasure, of life. During mummification, priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual designed to restore the senses of the dead, sight, hearing, breath, and sexual potency. Modern CT scans of royal mummies have revealed startling details. Artificial genitals carefully attached to ensure completeness for the afterlife. For Egyptians, this was not superstition. It was preparation for eternity. A man without a sexuality could not be truly alive, even beyond death. As centuries passed, Egyptian festivals grew bolder in celebrating this divine power. None were more infamous than the Festival of Men, the god of fertility, harvest, and virility. Men was depicted as a man with a towering erect phallus. his skin painted black to symbolize fertile soil. Every year, entire cities erupted in celebration of his strength. Priests carried massive statues of men through the streets. The god symbolic member held high as crowds cheered and women threw flowers before him. To outsiders, this might sound obscene, but to the Egyptians, it was a joyful acknowledgement of life itself. Women would bare themselves to men's image, believing that by exposing their bodies to the god, they would receive his blessing of fertility. Farmers prayed for abundant crops. Couples prayed for children. Even the pharaoh took part, cutting a symbolic sheet of grain to mark his own connection to the god's potency. Lettuce, yes, lettuce, played an unexpected role in the sacred ritual. The Egyptians noticed that when certain types of lettuce were cut, a milky white sap oozed from the stem, resembling male emission. They believed it was the god's favorite food, an offering that symbolized virility and creation. During the festival of men, great feasts were held with lettuce at the center of every table, and offerings were made to ensure the strength of the land, the people, and their ruler. Foreign visitors, like the Greek historian Herodotus, were both fascinated and horrified. To him, these public celebrations seemed indecent, a world away from the restrained temples of Greece. Yet even he admitted that the Egyptians' devotion was sincere, their faith unshakable. To them, sexuality was not something to hide. It was the heartbeat of existence, the rhythm that linked gods and humans in an unbroken chain of creation. In every carving, every myth, and every ritual, ancient Egypt revealed its truth, that the power of life and desire were one and the same. What seems shocking today was, to them, the very foundation of the cosmos. The Nile's endless cycle of life and death shaped how Egyptians viewed not only the world, but their own desires. Sex, for them, was not just an act, it was an echo of the god's own creation. Every gesture, every ritual, every whispered incantation had a purpose that reached beyond pleasure. It was about harmony, fertility, and eternal order, what they called Ma'at. Yet, behind this divine philosophy lay practices so unusual that even modern historians struggle to understand them without judgment. One of the strangest rituals was connected to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. According to myth, when Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, his devoted wife Isis gathered all his scattered body parts to resurrect him. But one piece was missing, his phallus. It had been thrown into the Nile and devoured by fish. So Isis, desperate to restore her husband's power, crafted a new one from gold and clay. She then used it to conceive their son, Horus. This myth alone became the cornerstone of Egyptian resurrection beliefs, and possibly inspired real-world rituals honoring fertility and rebirth. Some temples even featured symbolic recreations of this divine union, suggesting that sexuality and resurrection were eternally intertwined. But Egypt's relationship with the body did not stop at myth. In the daily life of its people, sex was both practical and sacred. Contraceptives existed long before modern science. Ancient papyri describe recipes using crocodile dung, honey, and natron, a salty mineral, to prevent pregnancy. As strange as that sounds, these mixtures had surprising chemical effects. Natron was highly alkaline and could reduce sperm mobility. Meanwhile, honey acted as a natural antibacterial. In a world without modern medicine, Egyptian women trusted the wisdom of midwives and temple healers to control their fertility with such substances. While some Egyptians pursued pleasure, others sought purity. The priests of high temples were often required to shave their entire bodies and avoid sexual relations before sacred ceremonies. The idea was that abstinence heightened spiritual connection. Yet paradoxically, in other rituals, sexuality was demanded to invoke divine energy. At the festival of men, the god of fertility, men paraded statues of men with erect symbols through crowded streets. The pharaoh himself was expected to honor men by performing an act of symbolic ejaculation toward the earth, ensuring fertility of the Nile Valley. Thousands would watch in reverence, not in shame. To them, this was not obscene. It was life itself, renewed before their eyes. In contrast, tomb paintings reveal scenes of tenderness and affection that remind us of the humanity beneath the ritual. Husbands and wives are shown touching hands, sharing food, or reclining together in quiet harmony. Erotic art existed too. found hidden within private chambers or painted on pottery. Unlike later civilizations that treated eroticism as sinful, Egyptians saw it as an extension of joy and love. For them, even in death, pleasure was not forgotten. Amulets shaped like sexual organs were buried with the deceased to ensure potency and fertility in the afterlife. They believed that eternal life was not a sterile existence, but one filled with vitality and continuation of human experience. Still, not all practices were celebrated. Some accounts hint at taboos that shocked even their contemporaries. Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, wrote of a disturbing custom involving the dead. According to his account, beautiful women's corpses were not immediately taken to embalmers for fear of necrophilia. Families waited several days until the body had begun to decay. While modern scholars debate the accuracy of this story, it reflects how powerful Egyptian sexuality appeared to outsiders. Their fascination with life cycles blurred the line between reverence and taboo in ways that baffled the Greeks and later, the Romans. Within royal circles, another kind of secrecy existed. The Pharaohs, considered gods on earth, often married their sisters or daughters to preserve divine bloodlines. The logic was cosmic, not carnal. Only a god could marry another god. But this tradition carried genetic consequences. Centuries later, it led to deformities like those seen in Tutankhamun and Akhenaten, whose skeletal remains reveal the cost of divine purity. To the Egyptian mind, these unions were not scandalous. They were acts of spiritual preservation, ensuring that the essence of Ra, the sun god, flowed unbroken through generations. To us, however, they expose the darker side of sacred tradition, how power can sanctify even the most unnatural of acts. Despite these extremes, Egyptian society granted women an unusual degree of freedom compared to other ancient civilizations. They could own property, initiate divorce, and engage in trade. Sexual autonomy was not hidden. Love poems inscribed on papyrus celebrated women's desire openly. One such verse from around 1200 BC reads, "I will go to the water to wash, and wait for you to see me." These verses, filled with longing and playful imagery, reveal that romance in ancient Egypt was not merely an institution. It was an art. Ordinary people expressed affection through music, perfume, and shared rituals of beauty. Men and women adorned themselves with oils and kohl, believing that physical attraction mirrored inner harmony. Seduction, for them, was sacred communication. Even the gods participated in these intricate emotional dramas. The goddess Hathor, often depicted as a cow or a woman with a sun disk, was both the mistress of music and the goddess of love. Her temples hosted festivals filled with dancing, wine, and erotic songs. Yet beneath the joy was deep symbolism. Hathor represented renewal, fertility, and the power of female sensuality. She was not shamed for her pleasures. She embodied them. The priests who served her would enter trance-like states, using music to connect with divine ecstasy. It was believed that through rhythm and movement, one could reach the threshold of the god's own pleasure. In this way, ancient Egypt was a civilization both disciplined and indulgent. It understood balance. Pleasure and purity, creation and decay, life and death, all were part of the same circle. Their bizarre sexual customs were never meant to shock. They were attempts to harmonize human desire with cosmic order. Every ritual, no matter how strange, echoed the fundamental truth that creation itself begins with union of body, spirit, and universe. And yet, hidden within the sands of time, some practices remain mysterious, perhaps deliberately concealed by priests who feared outsiders would misunderstand. The deeper one studies Egypt's sexuality, the clearer it becomes. It was never merely physical. It was theological, alchemical, and profoundly human. Centuries later, as the desert winds buried cities and temples beneath the dunes, whispers of those sacred acts survive in fragments, etched into broken walls and brittle papyrus scrolls. Each discovery has peeled back another layer of how the ancient Egyptians viewed intimacy. What the modern world might call bizarre was, to them, the rhythm of existence. To understand their practices is to step into a mindset where the human body was not sinful but divine, a living temple of creation itself. One of the most fascinating beliefs revolved around the act of breathing life into a statue. When artisans sculpted the image of a god or goddess, priests performed a secret ceremony called the opening of the mouth. This ritual symbolically brought the statue to life, allowing it to see, hear, and breathe. But deeper reading suggests that the ceremony had an erotic undertone. It paralleled a moment of divine conception, when breath, the essence of life, entered the body. Some scholars even propose that the ceremony mirrored sexual union as an act of cosmic animation. For Egyptians, life and desire were inseparable energies, woven into the same divine current. Even their view of dreams and fertility had intimate connections. Women seeking children would visit temples dedicated to Hathor or Isis and sleep within the sanctuaries, hoping for divine dreams that revealed their future pregnancies. Inscriptions found near these temples show that priests interpreted dreams as spiritual messages from gods, often filled with sexual or symbolic imagery. To the Egyptian mind, the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was thin, so thin that what happened in a dream could manifest in the waking world. Love itself was a form of magic, and desire, when guided by the gods, was creation in motion. Magic, or Heka, was central to Egyptian life. It was not seen as superstition, but as a natural law, a divine energy flowing through words, gestures, and symbols. In matters of love and lust, Heka was both a blessing and a weapon. Ancient love spells, written on pottery or linen, called upon deities to inflame passion or restore lost affection. Some were gentle prayers, others bordered on coercion. One surviving spell reads, "Let her heart burn for me like the flame of Ra until she comes." To modern readers, it sounds obsessive, even manipulative. Yet for Egyptians, passion was fire, beautiful, dangerous, and capable of creating life or destruction depending on how it was wielded. Not all of Egypt's sexual customs were rooted in divinity. Some were practical responses to the harsh realities of desert life. During the annual flooding of the Nile, many communities celebrated fertility festivals that encouraged open displays of affection and union. These gatherings symbolized a union of earth and water, female and male energies merging to bring abundance. Songs filled the air, dances adorned in lotus flowers moved through the crowd, and offerings of wine flowed freely. For a few nights each year, social hierarchies faded. Farmers, artisans, nobles, and even priests joined in the same celebration of life's cyclical renewal. It was a reminder that beneath the titles and rituals, everyone was bound by the same eternal needs: love, reproduction, and connection. Archaeologists have uncovered intriguing clues about how Egyptian couples expressed intimacy. Wall paintings in workers' villages like Deir el-Medina show couples reclining together, women offering perfume or lotus flowers to their lovers. Perfume held deep meaning. It was believed to attract not only humans, but gods. The lotus, which blooms each morning and closes at night, symbolized rebirth and sexual awakening. Its fragrance represented divine seduction, and it appears in nearly every depiction of love or erotic pleasure. Even Cleopatra, centuries later, carried this legacy forward, using fragrance as her weapon of allure. Perhaps the most haunting mystery of all lies within the tombs. For Egyptians, death was not the end. It was a passage to a more perfect life. The body had to be preserved in its most vital form, ready to reunite with the soul. During mummification, every organ had symbolic meaning, and even the reproductive organs were treated with sacred respect. In some cases, mummifiers applied oils and resins associated with fertility to ensure the deceased will remain virile or fertile in the afterlife. Some male mummies were even found with artificial phalluses attached, a physical guarantee that they would continue to create an eternity. Female mummies, too, were adorned with amulets shaped like wombs or protective goddesses, ensuring their power to give life beyond death. These were not gestures of vanity. They were the ultimate affirmation of Egypt's core belief: creation never stops. Yet as empires rose and fell, the sacred meaning of these practices began to fade. The arrival of Greek and later Roman influence brought new philosophies that divided the body and spirit. Pleasure became something to restrain, not celebrate. The temples that once echoed with songs of love and fertility turned silent. Statues of men in Hathor were buried or destroyed, and their rituals were recast as pagan excess. What had once been divine union was now labeled indecent. Over time, the Western world inherited that judgment, shaping modern attitudes that still struggle to separate sensuality from shame. And so, what was once sacred became bizarre. But history has a way of revealing its truths when we least expect it. Every discovery, from faded murals to preserved papyrus scrolls, offers a glimpse into a civilization that dared to see the divine in the most human of experiences. Their sexual customs were never about perversion. They were about power, creation, and the eternal cycle of rebirth. To them, love was magic, fertility was survival, and pleasure was proof of life's beauty. What they left behind was not scandal. It was a language of intimacy that transcended time. Today, when we look back on their world, we can see that what seemed strange was, in fact, profoundly human. The people of ancient Egypt lived in harmony with forces most modern societies try to suppress. They embraced the mystery of the body, not as sin, but as a sacred vessel of creation. Their myths, rituals, and even their so-called bizarre practices remind us that sexuality, in its purest form, was their way of touching eternity. And perhaps that is why, thousands of years later, we are still fascinated by them. Beneath the sands of their tombs lies a truth more enduring than stone, that love, desire, and creation are not separate from the divine. They are the divine. The ancient Egyptians understood this long, before the rest of the world dared to believe it. And in that truth, their legacy continues to whisper, reminding us that what we call bizarre might just be what makes us human.